Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. Let's get right on into it. All right, folks, we got to talk about whether or not Saban was out-coached.
No way.
And we're also going to talk about Brew is back for Tennessee, which is huge. And we're going to talk about whether Nick might be retiring after this year. And that usually comes up every time Alabama gets knocked out of the playoff or whatever. But at some point, it may very well happen. But let's get into this whole thing about whether or not Saban was out-coached. And, of course, I watched the entire game. I'm sure you did too. It kind of felt like he may very well have been. Now, that's really hard for me to say because Nick Saban's been the GOAT for so long that he almost can't be out-coached. But, he brought in Tommy Rees and he brought in Kevin Steele, which I thought were marginal hires. They were okay. They weren't great. He usually has, former head coaches that are really good and very inventive. It felt like they were a step behind, and Michigan kept shifting their players and getting mismatches, and I think that's how they were able to get all that pressure on Milroe, and it also freed them up in their running game a little bit, and some of those little short passes, they kept getting wide open. Now, Alabama still should have won the game, even though really Michigan bullied them. That just shows you how good a coach that Nick Saban is, and some of the mistakes that Michigan made. But honestly, Alabama could have easily won that game. And we're going to talk about some of the causes of that too, like those bad snaps. But let's get into this out-coaching thing. And this is on Saturday Down South by Paul Harvey. Not that Paul Harvey. He said it was quite frankly shocking to see Nick Saban out-coached by Harbaugh. Says Finebaum was stunned to see the coaching performance delivered by Nick Saban. He said, to be fair, most of the country was surprised to see a Michigan squad that looked 2 steps ahead at every turn, considering Harbaugh's track record. Harbaugh's been a good coach everywhere he's been. He won at Stanford, and Stanford's terrible now, by the way. He won in the NFL, darn near won a Super Bowl, and he's won at Michigan. Now, granted, Connor Stallion seems to have helped him over the last 2.5 years, but he was winning before that, not to the level that he's used to. So Jim Harbaugh's a good coach. I don't think there's any question about that. Said the Crimson Tide looked ill-prepared from the jump. They struggled to make adjustments. And that's something that a Saban coach is usually really good at. And I noticed at the end of the first half when they were talking to the two coaches as they went into the locker room that Harbaugh looked pumped up. He looked happy. And Nick Saban looked really frustrated. And that's what I took from it, that Harbaugh felt like things were going their way and that Saban felt like he was kind of hanging on. And Finebaum said being around a bunch of analysts on the field during the game, he said that's what I kept hearing, that Michigan was out-coaching them. And then Finebaum just flat out said it. He said he just got out-coached. Of course, he criticized Tommy Rees. I think several people have. Said he was underwhelmed by the offense. And really, the defensive backs are coached by Saban. That's always been his thing. So it was really less on the defense. I think they expected more out of the offense. But a lot of it, too, were those bad snaps. There were several of them. Now, I'm not going to sit here and rip on the center that did that look. I play Division I sports. Nobody's harder on a player than themselves. So I'm sure he's not feeling good about those snaps. So I'm not going to sit here and rip on him. But it played a factor without question. And there was a couple of them where it just totally stopped drives. Where like on a second down, they lost 13 yards, and they lost another 6 yards, had to punt, and they were moving the ball well. And that's just, it's like a turnover. And then the last play was really difficult. I really think that snap threw Jalen Milroe off. And if you look at the picture, you can see where he had to pick it up off the ground. And he immediately went straight forward, and I think it kind of panicked him a little bit. And if you look at this play, you can see where the pulling offensive lineman was getting ready to block the Michigan player. And if he'd have followed that blocker, he probably would have scored. But he got tripped up because one of the Michigan players bull rushed an Alabama offensive lineman and pushed him back. And because Milroe, I think because he was kind of stressed out because of the snap, ran straight forward and tripped over his own player's legs. Had he followed that blocker, he would have scored. So that was a very frustrating play as well, obviously. It was the last play of the game. So even though he got out-coached, technically, he still could have very easily won the game. And that's because Nick Saban's a great coach. He's always going to have his team in position to win, and they're very hard to beat. It's just a fact. Michigan had to have some breaks to win the game. It's just the way it was. And here they're talking about whether or not he should retire or whether he's contemplating it.
How dare you!
So this is Saban's 28th overall season as a college head coach. And Finebaum was asked about it. He said it's possible. He talks about the fact he's 72 years old. And while he's still recruiting really well, he He hates the transfer portal. He does not like the NIL. You can't stockpile those great players and have that depth. And it's really what it's created is parity in college football. And we're going to see more and more of that with the 12-team playoff, because these great players that are usually sitting on the bench for Alabama or Georgia are no longer doing that. That's one of the reasons why the SEC is not going to win a national title this year. There's just been so many great players that are moving around and going to other teams that Alabama and Georgia really can't just completely dominate the way they've done over the last several years. Transfer portal is really going to help the teams that are kind of on the cusp of getting over the top. I mean, you saw that with Florida State. They went to the transfer portal, all of a sudden they went undefeated. You've seen it with Ole Miss. Look what Ole Miss is doing. You know, they won 11 games this year for the first time ever, and they've loaded up in the transfer portal, and they are a significant risk to win a national title next year. It would not shock me. I've got them as a dark horse. And you see a lot of teams doing that. Tennessee's been doing that quite a bit, picking up just those key players that have been sitting on the bench somewhere that could really help us. And Georgia lost 5 5-stars in the transfer portal who were tired of sitting on the bench, including a quarterback. So I think it's great for parity. I think it's great for all the other teams. I think it sucks for Alabama and Georgia and the very top teams, maybe even Ohio State. But they're still going to be great. It's not like, don't feel sorry for Alabama or Georgia. Don't ever feel sorry for them. So there is a lot of talk about that. We also know that Nick Saban just spent $28 million on a home down in Jupiter, Florida, or it might have been $19 million. 19, 28. What's the difference when you make as much money as he does?
Affleck.
But anyway, we'll see what happens. He's going to retire at some point. He can't coach forever. It's a matter of how competitive he is. I don't know if he's somebody that can spend a whole lot of time out on a golf course. Now let's talk about Bru McCoy coming back for the Vols. This is huge. First of all, he's a 5-star. We'll start with that. He has been an absolute dog out there as far as wide receiver. He catches everything that comes near him. He had the big catch against Alabama that helped us win that game. He's clutch as can be. And the great thing that he does, besides being a terrific wide receiver, is that he blocks downfield beautifully, whether it's a bubble screen. I mean, he frees guys up all the time. But he also, when a running back gets running free, he's down there blocking those defensive backs at 225 pounds. He's basically a linebacker out there blocking for him, and that's what frees a lot of our running plays. Instead of getting 8 or 10 yards, we'll get 15 or 20 yards because of Bru McCoy, and sometimes we'll get 60 and get a touchdown. He's just that important, and having him come back, especially for Nico, is fantastic. He will be a security blanket on third downs for him. If you throw the ball in his sphere, he's going to catch it. You can just count on it. He's not going to be one of those guys that drops the ball during critical times. So that'll be great for him. And, of course, we've got really a ton of wide receiver talent there. And I know we've been talking about Evan Stewart possibly coming from Texas A&M, who's another 5-star wide receiver. But I don't think we really need him. And the reports are that we're no longer interested in bringing him in, which makes sense. I would spend NIL money on defensive backs, which is where our weakness is, or maybe another offensive line to help protect Nico. I would categorize defensive backs, then maybe offensive linemen, something along those lines. I don't think we need to spend any money at wide receiver. We've got tons of talent, and now we've got a guy that can flat deliver it. You can see the touch that he puts on the ball. He's very accurate. If we'll just give him some time, I think he'll be terrific. In the bowl game, our top 2 tackles were out, our starters, and he didn't have much time, and our top 2 running backs were out as well because they opted for the draft, and we weren't picking up blitzes. So he got sacked 6 times. He still managed to score 4 touchdowns because, look, the guy's got it. He just does. He's got that ability to make things happen that some players do. You've seen it with Hendon Hooker. You've seen it with Bryce Young, those types of players that just – they make things happen. They just seem to be ahead of the game. And he's a true freshman, first start, and scores 4 touchdowns against a top 10 defense.
Hello?
We're going to be fine at quarterback. Just keep him healthy, and we're fine at wide receiver. So let's just focus where we need help, defensive backfield. So I couldn't be more pleased with this news. I think it's fantastic. Probably our most reliable wide receiver, without question, is Bru McCoy. So having him come back, that's an A+. All right, folks, did want to cover this. I think it's the first time I've ever seen Nick Saban outcoached. I got to admit it. Look, he got outcoached by a Big Ten guy, Jim Harbaugh. And we're going to see what happens with Harbaugh. I don't know if he's going to win or not. They got to beat Washington, and that Michael Penix Jr. is terrific. That's going to be a heck of a ball game. It should be a lot of fun. But the Harbaugh thing, we'll see. NCAA might have to hand him the title. And then who knows what happens? Does he get suspended for a year? Does he get a show cause? Well, I can tell you what Michigan's going to do. They're going to take that national title and said, that's our cause. See that right there? We're showing it to you because we're going to keep him for the next 10 years. Or he may go to the NFL. We'll see. It's going to be a heck of a ball game. The whole world's going to be watching. And the Big Ten coaches that are angry, oh, if he ends up winning, I don't know how this is going to play out. What a mess. But should be fantastic viewing. And if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Lets me know to continue to cover all these big news events. And, of course, my Vols. And if you've not subscribed, it's on your right, my left. Just hit this little button. I'd appreciate it. Costs you nothing. Helps me out. And right over here is the most recent video. YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. And we'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.